writing mean to you? I'm Kauffman, and I'm on a mission to connect with every creative writer in the world. And I need your help. The world is constantly changing, which is why it's our duty, no, it's our responsibility to inspire creativity. My creative writing tips, tricks, and strategies are gonna help you become a better writer, so that way you can beat procrastination. Do you have a story that you're dying to tell, but you don't know what to do next? I can actually help you craft a story today. Welcome to Kauffman Writes, the first creative writing show on the internet for inspiration, motivation, strategy, discussion, advice, and maybe a little bit of procrastination. But don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I'm Kauffman, and I'm on a mission to change your world and help every writer out there see that the entire process of creative writing can be so much fun, whether that's brainstorming, writing, editing, or anything in between. You have found yourself on World Building Wednesdays. Welcome. We had a very successful chat last week as we hopped into how do you build a successful world for your story. We're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive. I'll be going over some techniques along with my own and things that I've seen work well. And then we'll hop into our writing sprint afterwards. And by the way, if you're, I didn't create a banner for that. All right. If you are watching this on the replay, there we go. There's the replay. If you're watching this on the replay, don't worry. I got you covered. If the time codes will be added to the stream after it airs. So that way you can hop to the section of the video that you find the most value of. All right. Excelente. So I'm going to throw up world building techniques. Woo! If there's one thing I love doing, it's building worlds for my stories. All right, let me hop into the comments. Marta, welcome to the stream. By the way, Marta was just sharing how she's almost done with her story. She's like getting to the end. I just want to huge congratulations because that's always such an exciting feeling. Welcome, John. Welcome, my man. I had enough time to briefly look at your email without responding to it. You had some absolutely great advice. Thank you for sending that over, my man. That was incredible. It goes to show that there's always more room for improvement, especially as my goal isn't to be incredible. My goal is to improve 0.1% every single day. So excellent. All right. And let's go straight into world building. What do we do when we're working on building worlds for our story? Now, if you've been joining me for a while, you know that my story, Last Scarecrow, is this very intricate, crazy fantasy world where there's scarecrows, there's animals. I got a pixie and a crow. R.I.P. Crow. We have tigers and lions and bears. Oh my, pun intended. So what does it take to make a world for your story? Now, as I pull up what I had from last week, these were a couple of world building tips that we touched upon. We touched upon the ideas of researching a pre-existing society, culture or belief system, because if you're going to create something, you want to know you want to know things that have worked successfully. You also want to know what the vibe is of your world, what each location that will take place in your story. And you want to be aware of which references are going to be specific to that will affect your main story, whether that's the book you're working on or the overall. And another good suggestion was leveraging events that affect the entire world. So that was some core ideas that we went over last week. If you want to know more and you want to do a little bit of deep dive, if you missed last Wednesday, go check out the stream World Building Wednesdays from last week. I was like, that would have been episode 10. Let's see. Today's Wednesday. That would have been 108, I believe. That would have been episode 108. Okay. So where are we at today? So when I think about world building, let's start from the ground up. So let's do a step-by-step guide on what is my technique when I build a world. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. I'll blow this up a little bit more, make sure you can see it. All right, world building technique. And this is a strategy that you can absolutely steal. Let's see. That totally makes sense, John. Absolutely. I've been a live stream aficionado for over a year. Yeah, that's absolutely really cool. Yeah, I think I think everyone has experience, and I think if it sounds like you watch and you engage with a lot of live streams, and I actually really appreciate that you took the time to provide that feedback and that value. That's so cool. So that's awesome. All right, what do we got? So as I think about world building techniques, and I think about what my technique is when it comes to crafting my world and crafting the story that I want to tell. The first thing I like to do is I like to understand what is the overall type of world that I want to create. What's the overall type of world that I want my story to take place in? So we will start with one type of world. Now, a lot of the times this can be a stereotypical one that's been done time and time again. This could be a brand new idea for a world. It can be a mix of different genres. But it's important to first define what is going to be the overall style of it. For example, when I started on my fantasy world, Last Scarecrow, the reason I figured out what type of world I wanted to do was I thought about a type of world that I wanted to create, right? So the type of world, focus on what you want. Focus on what you want. Focus on what sounds fun to you. And then also, how is this world going to be relevant to the story? How is this world going to be relevant to either, and when I say your story, I mean your protagonist's journey or the message that you want to get across. Is this world going to be relevant to your, let's just go heroes, to your hero's journey or the message of the story? Let's see. So when I think about these two, I think these are both very great ideas when I'm focusing on developing my first world for a story. For example, with Last Scarecrow, I knew that my idea I wanted to create, the idea I wanted to tell and leverage the story was is it possible for me to tell a story about what it means to be human in a world where humans no longer exist? So that's been the challenge to myself. And I'm like, all right, so what is the best type of setting, or what is the best type of like generic world to start off with that I think would be fun? I've never written a post-apocalyptic type world before. I've done dystopian and utopian worlds, which I absolutely love, but I've never done a post-apocalyptic. And I think that sounds like the type of setting where for some reason or another, humans wouldn't exist in a post-apocalyptic world. Maybe something happened to them. So that was the setting. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start post-apocalypse. That's the type of world that I want to go with. But let's say you're doing like one that's grounded in the real world, or one maybe like that's a thriller that's grounded in present day. If you're going to do it in present day, that's fine. But be realistic with yourself, right? Does this take place in present day 2024? Does this take place in present day 2045? How much of a time difference from the present moment is this story taking place in? And then you also have to recognize that if you are doing a time skip, or if you are like jumping ahead 10 years or going back 10 years, that by the time your story is published, by the time your script is optioned and then made into put onto media, the whatever date you went with will then technically be outdated because it's going to take time for it to be put out there. So always something to keep in mind if you're writing a story that takes place in the real world. Let's see. Hey, Vaughn, welcome to the stream, my man. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for dropping by, my dude. Let's see. In my book, I have two separate worlds. But let's see. Marto is sharing in my book. I have two separate worlds which were joined into one, but half book takes place in Peru and half book in London. I even check the authentic places in the internet and trying to describe. That's actually really cool. And that actually really works with three-part storytelling, right? So that makes me think that the first third of the story is the old world. Second part of the story is the new world. Then the climax and the third act is really how those two worlds combine. So that's awesome. Really, really great work. That's incredibly. And Peru and London, two absolutely different types of environments. Good luck with the rest of the journey, my friend. Dave, welcome back to the stream. Welcome, welcome. I was super impressed with your story that we were chatting about yesterday. That was super cool, my man. That's awesome. I think you definitely have a best-selling idea on your hand. And usually the best way for world building, and this is a pro tip, if you're building a world that takes place in present day society, absolutely rely on your experience, rely on your perception of the world, and that will help create your style of the world that you want to create and put your characters into. I always think that's a really cool idea. Now, you also want to research, like I'd shared previously in my tips, to help build the foundation of the world and make it stronger. Yeah, and John, I see that you mentioned that you liked realism and writing in realism, and a lot of authors are like that. A lot of authors prefer being grounded in the present moment and being grounded in today's society because that's better. It makes it better, easier to relate with other readers who are like that type of writing. All right. So once I've thought about the core world and I thought about the core structure of the world that I want to create, the next thing that I want to do now, you have a couple options here. Either option A, I'll give you two options. Option A, think of a list of settings that would be fun for your characters to be a part of. So think of a list of settings. This is a great idea for brainstorming and strategizing. Or option B, define what type of society or what type of structure the world is ruled by. Diff gun. Define a society and structure. This can also include political norms, politics, religion. This could be a social hierarchy. The reason this is important is because these elements are in some way, shape, or form going to affect your characters as they travel through each of the locations in your world. Now, you don't have to dive deep into these right now. You don't have to go too hardcore on the research. The goal is just pick general ideas that seem kind of interesting. And then as you're writing, it gives you the chance to be able to explore some of these ideas. So the list of settings is a little bit of an easier one because the list of settings, you can just think of like, okay, I want my story to take place in, let's see, some forest. I'm more thinking of a fantasy forest, a tavern, fantasy tavern. Let's go to a castle. Let's go to outer space. All right, that's going to be quite an interesting story. I'm mixing it up here. So here's the thing. It's the only one who defines the limits is you. If you're writing a fantasy story and you want to go to outer space, more power to you. Have fun and figure out like, okay, how do they get there? Right? And I think there's so many strategies that you can do to get your characters to a scenario, to a place that sounds fun. All right, and Dave, it's great for the spell check. Dave, thanks for that. Actually, Grammarly, I actually do have Grammarly installed. I've been using Grammarly a lot for word choice and settings when I'm in my writing. If if you stick around till the writing sprint on the back end of this stream, you'll see I actually end up using Grammarly a lot. I try not to mess around with it too much when I'm kind of going through ideas and things. So that way it's not too distracting. So I'm like, okay, Grammarly, let's, I do not need a period after setting right now. But thanks for the heads up, man. I absolutely agree. And it is interesting. I actually didn't think that I ever needed Grammarly before. Somebody got it for me as a present to try. And it's like ever since I've used it, I'm like, wow, yeah, it's been great. Wonderful. I know, the tavern in outer space. We're like where we're going in the direction of creating we're gonna do a space opera this time. I'm like the outer space. Actually, some of my favorite stories are like space, when you have like space cowboys. Some space cowboy stories are really fun. One of my favorites was always Firefly and the Serenity stories from way back. Super fun. Mandalorian does all right in space. Of course, all the Star Wars stuff is fun. I think one of my favorite. No, that wouldn't be. I'm like trying to think of if there's any other favorite sci-fis that come to mind. Not at the moment. Okay, let's do a total Star Wars wrap-off. We're going to start talking about some space pirates and all these space pirates traveling to different taverns in space and maybe looting them, or maybe they want to own the galaxy. I think doing spoofs and doing spoofs type stories do really work. I mean, after the original Star Wars came out, Spaceballs was a very, very popular Star Wars spoof. After it was very well done. Sometimes spoofs work. I think with spoofs, just like any other genre, you want to make sure that the spoof is set in its own world. Well, the material will spoof whatever source material it's using. The spoof itself still takes place in its own unique universe. Even if everything is exaggerated and corny and over the top, it still has to feel believable. The characters still have to be following their own hero's journey and things that make sense within the world that's outlined of the spoof. They are. The reason spoofs are hard is because a lot of time this problem happened a lot with a lot of the scary movies. There's that scary movie franchise a while back, but the reason they're hard is because spoofs a lot of the time end up trying to make jokes about the source material without staying true to its own unique story. That was one of the reasons that Spaceballs actually did well, because even though it spoofed the Star Wars franchise, it still stayed true to the characters and the own story that it was trying to serve. When people feel like they're watching something and someone's trying to make a joke at them, it can pull them out of the story subconsciously and make it feel a little less authentic. Even if they might think that it's funny, we want to go into it as a real authentic storytelling experience. What's up, Atomic? Glad you could make it to the stream, my friend. All right. So when I think about this, so I gave you two different options. So option A is going to be a little easier. This is going to be easy option, easy choice. And option B is going to be, we'll just call them the medium choice. So let's see. So you got two options. What I'll do is I will do this. No, I don't like that. I'm going to make that a separate. Perfect. So option A and option B, when you're thinking of world building, let me pull this out a little bit. Perfect. So you figured out the type of world that you want to start with. Then you've thought about some options for filling in the blanks. And then you've either come up with a list of settings that are going to take place in your story, or you've thought about some of like the structure and the dynamics of the back end of the world. Now, some writers, if you're the type who likes to plan everything out, if you're more of a plotter, then by all means, dig into researching and dig into developing these ideas. If you're more of like, you just like to get into it, then I recommend doing the option A, just coming up with the list of settings. So then it helps give your story some form and it gives you ideas as you're working on your characters and you're working on the storytelling. Okie dokie. So now that I've come up with those, the next part. So let's call this not. So let's call this step number 3 is explore the world. Explore the world. And what I mean by this is don't be afraid to make choices. Don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to try crazy things. Try the craziest things. Try things that don't make sense. Because especially in the rough draft, that's your time to have fun. That's your time to do whatever you want. And that's your time to explore the world as much as possible. As you can always go back after the rough draft. You can create a map if you want. You can come up with some more substantial ideas for like, okay, maybe I want this type of religion to take place in this world. Maybe I want these certain types of events to really define the world. There's many different ways you can go about it, but it comes down to what you want. And 9 times out of 10, I promise you, once you've written the rough draft of the story, by the time you get to the end of the story, you're going to have a much better idea. You're going to have a much better viewpoint and standard of where of what type of world that you're really working in. Maybe you started your world as a sci-fi space opera, but then as you've been writing it, your characters come to life. You come up with like some factions, you come up with some evil characters, you come up with some fun politics and all these different things. By the time you reach the end, you're like, it's not actually a space opera. It's going to be a little bit more of like a sci-fi. It might have more of like a Western feel. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more of a horror. So it'll be like a Western horror that takes place in space. But you only learn that through the writing process and the journey of building out the world. So I think that's the fun part. And I think I love to go with the world exploration because I want you to enjoy the process. Don't set too many like standards or goals to yourself. I'd rather that you sit down, that you write, you have fun. And if you hit a block on one part, that's all right. If you hit a block, you're like, I don't know what to do. Think of your favorite story that you've heard lately, your favorite TV show, movie. Pick a setting from that franchise and then use that setting. You can always go back and adjust it later on. That's totally all right. All right, Dave, it looks like you already have another fan. The AI pen from yesterday sounded interesting. It definitely did. Dave, I think you're going to have to be up to the challenge of writing this bestseller now. Thanks for rejoining, Docetes. Thanks for coming back to the stream. I know Dave ended up coming up with like a little bit of a synopsis for the story, and I think it's going to I think he's got something cool with it. I'm super excited to hear about it. I think a story about an AI pen and this AI typewriter who are maybe going to do something crazy with the world is actually interesting. And AI is on everybody's mind right now. So people are already going to be interested in an AI type story because it's a trending topic. And that's probably not going to be changing anytime soon with how AI is continuing to evolve month by month. So this 2024 is definitely the year of AI development in terms of technology anyways. Yeah, and that's a really good call out, Marta. When I think the best part of writing is when you're working on it and you kind of lose track of time, you kind of lose track of what you're working on, and then you like come back to reality and you're like, wow, you have this incredible story. You have an absolutely incredible story. Thank you for sharing that, Marta. I really appreciate your comments. You're definitely more than welcome to share anytime. No worries. Okay. So as I've thought about these three, so this is like an easy 3-step strategy for world building. Let's say maybe world building is like not your jam and you're just not, it doesn't come easy to you. This is a really easy strategy. So step 1, which type of world are you doing? Step 2, pick option A or option B. This is easy. And then step 3 is explore the world. Now, this is for when you're developing your world for a rough draft. Obviously, once you get to the second draft of your story, you're going to now want to go back and I'll include this as a step. We'll just say like second draft goal. And let me make sure. Nope. All right, and I'll put this here. So literally first draft goal, I think this is actually really, really important to set goals for yourself. Goal setting is so important because then you can focus on like, what's the thing that I'm trying to accomplish? If maybe this is like your first like real story and you're going to publish it this time, maybe your goal is just to write the story and get the story written, right? And then if that's the case, then don't worry about the minutia. If you get writer's block, try something crazy, have fun. Like that's the goal. So first goal, I'm going to make it really easy for you, is have fun writing the story and try new things. That's your first goal when you're building like a brand new world. Have fun and try new things. Your second draft goal, let's say you got through the first draft, let's say maybe it's X amount of words, and your second draft goal is going to be look back at each of the settings. Now you're going to look at each of the settings. We'll go settings. Let me make sure I'm going to go bullet point. So you're going to look at your settings and let's go. I think there's so many different things that we really could focus on. I think for now, let's just focus on the settings, because if I really wanted to go into all the elements, we could talk about like world events. We could talk about the politics, religion. We could talk about social hierarchy. We can talk about economy. We could talk about what other ones? There are definitely more than enough types of elements about the world. Let me see, politics, religion, social hierarchies. We could talk about factions / kingdoms / cities / organizations. Those are just different names. There's so many different things that you can really dive into the world, but it's not all going to be relevant to the core story. So I always recommend focus on the settings and locations that are taking place in this novel. If you're writing like a couple of different novels, then of course you're going to want to build out the world and you can make notes and you can dive into each of these ones. But for this story, focus on the settings that take place in this story and which elements of the world are going to affect the core story. So that way you don't make it too difficult on yourself. Once again, my goal is always to make it easy. Let's see. Let me hop back into the comments. Yeah, Marta disagrees. Absolutely. Let's see. Could you leave the world out? Let's read a Board of the Rings type. Could you leave the world out completely? I was like, nobody wants to read a Board of the Rings. Yeah, and I mean, I think that what you're referring to is when we think of common like stereotypes and tropes, right? Nobody wants to read a retelling of Lord of the Rings, right? We want to hear brand new worlds that might seem similar, like something we've read before, but still feel completely different. I know. I'm actually glad you mentioned the Silmarillion. That is literally the perfect example. Silmarillion, it's an interesting read. It is interesting, but it reads almost like a history book sometimes. J.R. Tolkien. Let's see. Let's see. I prefer magic in the world, whereas elf. John, you bring up a good point. I prefer magic in the world where it is elf magic or magic because they wear this ring a lot more than all the other mechanics of the magic stuff. So, John, you actually bring up a really good You bring up a really good point. A lot of my stories, I tend to write fantasy and sci-fi. You Magic is generally such an integral part of obviously the fantasy genre, whereas sci-fi, usually it's the technology and the science. If there is a core mechanic, let's just call it the fantastical mechanic, maybe even in your, like, let's say you write a story that takes place in the real world. This could be maybe this could be like fate, maybe this could be that idea. But if there's a fantastical, maybe it could be something that's supernatural. But if you're creating a fantastical mechanic for your world, I think it's important to signify, and you bring up a really good point. This would actually be a great video to talk about, in terms of how do you create and craft a fantastical mechanic for your world. I just want to make a note for myself. Because, like, let's think about the different types of like magic. Let's think about different magic systems. The three that come to mind, I'm going to think of the magic from very popular genres, right? So let's think about the magic from Lord of the Rings, right? The type of magic with the One Ring and Gandalf and Saruman, and that what that magic feels like and what it looks like. And then, of course, if you read the Silmarillion, you're a little more familiar with the lore of the world, as compared to the magic of Harry Potter. I have to learn a spell and I have to cast it with a wand 8 times out of 10. Whereas let's now look at the magic of Avatar: The Last Airbender, using the elements of nature itself to do the thing, right? So I think it's important to define how does your magic system work. I would absolutely love to do a future video on magic if this is something you guys want to chat about. I love fantasy structures. The magic in my story, Last Scarecrow, is very, I would say it's very subversive. It does have a magical system. I haven't spent too much time defining the core idea of the magical system. I have a couple of ways that I'm going about it, but I'm letting it evolve through the story so I can go back and jump into it on the second draft. Yeah, magic used sparingly can be great, but it also comes down to what type of system it is, right? We've seen stories where magic is used all the time. We've seen stories where it's used sparingly. The magic system just depends on the story that you're trying to tell. That's really all that it is. A common problem that newer writers will have with magic systems is like, how do you put a cap? How do you put a limit on magic so that way it doesn't like defeat the purpose of the story? If the character has access to any type of magic based off the world, why do they go through the journey? Why don't they just teleport themselves to the villain and stab them in the back? Why don't they just like get a knife and stab them? Right? You have to have limits to your magic system. And I think that's a really great call out. Absolutely. Let's see. And I think this is some absolutely great discussion. So with that said, I think we've touched on a couple of really good topics and themes. That was a really good structure for setting up for just my technique about how I like to go about building out my worlds. And this is just my technique for like a rough draft. This is for the rough draft. The second draft, I set up just a few goals, and really it's just defining the world building elements as it pertains to the core story. And I think those are absolutely important. So with those on, I'm going to move right on to my daily writing sprint. I'm ready to get some writing in. I'm actually super stoked for where I'm at with Last Scarecrow. And by the way, if you're, I change that. If you're enjoying the stream and you got value out of this, make sure to tap that subscribe button or the follow button and just let me know that you enjoyed it. you'll be alerted when I go live daily. I'm crazy like that. I'm on a challenge to myself to write 30 minutes a day for a year. So come join us, come join the community. Every single day, we're chatting about different things. Monday through Friday is Kauffman Writes, where we'll talk about different elements of storytelling. Saturday is the story and critique show, where writers can submit story excerpts, and I do live readings and critiques. So definitely send me your excerpt of your story, and I would love to take a crack at it. I want to say for this Saturdays, I have about 5 to 7 submissions so far. So the sooner the better. And then Sunday, we got the Creative Right Now podcast. So please stay tuned. And I actually have a good group. So I'm going to actually have a couple people on for this Sunday's podcast episode. The last one, Write Stories That Matter, with author Mike Clausen, was phenomenal. The interview went out so much better than I expected. Definitely go check out that episode on my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Very, very valuable. All right, so I'm going to set the music, reset my screen. All right, and we are here. I don't need that. Oof. I can't believe that my story is at 78,000 words. And by the way, if you've had kind of like a busy week, or you've had a busy couple of days, don't worry. Totally no pressure to feel like writing if you're not in the mood. You can actually sit back and relax, and I'll write vicariously for the both of us. I've included the setting and the synopsis on the side. Otherwise, let's say you're feeling super creative, come join me on the sprint, whether that's brainstorming, writing, or editing. All right, and let me cue up the music. That's actually a good one. You bring off. So when you say ripping off stuff, that's actually all right. When we're developing ideas and we're trying to come up with things that work out, you should take things that are already working, take them into your own storytelling, tweak them, move them around, try different ways of going about it. That's actually a really great strategy, especially for newer writers. There's a reason that fan fiction is probably one of the most popular ways for new writers to get into storytelling, because there's already a pre-existing set of rules, worlds, and principles. Aw, thanks so much for that, Marta. I really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it. Glad you're enjoying the stream. All right, so let me pull up. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm actually about to write a really crazy chapter. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm mentally prepared for what I'm actually about to write. I looked at where I'm at on my section. So I'm just hit chapter 34, the bargain ritual. Where did we leave off yesterday? I don't even know if I set a new chapter title. Wow. Okay. Okay, so far in the chapter, we just have the characters waking up and kind of talking with each other. And then Gore wondering how the Scarecrow remembers what it means, or remembers what it was like to talk with humans, since he believes that they've been dead for a very long time. Okay. Okay, I am ready. All right, we got 30 minutes on the clock, and That's right. Okay. I think that was absolutely, let's see. There we go. A writing sprint. And I think that was absolutely a great sprint that I got on my part. I did it as a 30-minute, probably went to about 35 or so. I really feel like I set up the the I set up the rest of their little journey for getting to the start of this ritual. So now I'm actually at the start, the beginning of the ritual. So we'll get to play around with that tomorrow. As I'm thinking about like the description and this part of their journey, I know in the second draft, I'll probably be asking myself on, are these parts of the transition, are these parts of their like getting from place to place, are they necessary? There's different parts of it I'm exploring, and I'm really focusing on developing the characters of not just Scarecrow, but touching upon Pebble, Gore, and Stretch throughout this part of the journey, while also referencing Gold Scales development as well. I think it's absolutely important for some of the events that are about to show up. So awesome. I feel great. That was wonderful. All right. So that was a successful little writing sprint. That's all that I got for you today, my fellow writers. I'm going to wrap up the stream, but don't forget, tap that like button on your way out. Let me know that you got some value. And we definitely got through some really great world building techniques, things, tips, and somewhere in between. So don't forget to hit that like button. All right. And I'll be back tomorrow. For Thursday, I'm still thinking if I want to do dialogue or something different for tomorrow's day. I'll let you know. So be on the lookout for tomorrow's stream. I'll be here for another episode of Kauffman Writes. That is all that I got for you. Remember, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers.